People, what is the most trashiest thing you've ever witnessed? I attended my cousin's wedding, walked into the men's room, and found a line of guys waiting for their turn with a drunk bridesmaid who was sobbing about how much she loved the groom. She was not taking things well as the groom's best friend, who clearly had some unrequited feelings. The bride, being a gracious person, still included her in the wedding party, which turned out to be a huge mistake. As a thank you for this kindness, the bridesmaid spent the event pulling every stunt imaginable. She tried convincing the bride to cheat on the groom with a dancer or have a final fling, presumably so she could run to the groom with the news. When that failed, she attempted to seduce the bride's brother. Then the groom's brother, who was also the best man. Neither worked. By the time the wedding rolled around, she had officially given up on subtlety. She showed up already smashed, skipped the speeches, allegedly did a couple of lines of something, and then proceeded to drag any guy she could find into the bathroom for a little private reception. And there were several. She was an attractive girl, after all. She tried to sabotage the bride, seduce multiple relatives, and generally ruin the wedding of two people who had done nothing but treat her with kindness. Before we continue, do us a quick favor. Smash that like button and subscribe to support our channel. Story 2. I had a good friend that had a very trashy family. My parents would never let me stay overnight at her house. For some reason, this one time my mom said I could. Her mistake. My friend fell asleep while we were watching a movie in the living room that evening with her elder brother, who was already missing one front tooth. After a while he whispers, "Hey, look." I turned to look at him and witness my first stiffy. He was grinning at me, then starts begging me to give him a blowy until I tell him I'm going to wake up his sister and tell her if he doesn't stop. And he finally quit. After the movie ended, I woke her up and suggested it was time to go to bed. We headed upstairs to her room and got settled in. Thankfully, her brother's room was downstairs. In the corner of her room, her parents had a newspaper spread out on the floor with a coffee sitting in the middle of it. I didn't ask any questions about it. Later that night, I woke up needing to use the bathroom and quietly made my way downstairs. Halfway down, I see her mom lying on the couch and her dad standing in front of her. The mom looks at me, whispers something, and the dad turns and sees me, bam! Seeing my second hard dong in my life, in one night. He puts his dress on and runs to me yelling, "Get your back upstairs." I told him I needed to use the bathroom. He yells, "That's what the coffee can in the bedroom is for." I ran to the bathroom, shut the door, turned on the light, watched the cockroaches scatter, and pee real quick. I ran back up to the bedroom and lay awake all night. In the morning, I go to the kitchen and use the phone to call my mom to come get me ASAP while watching my friend's mom with a gallon jug of milk, half full, adding water to it until the jug is full. So yeah, that was the trashiest thing I've ever witnessed. Story 3. This took place at a friend of a friend's 17th birthday party. The birthday girl's boyfriend brought his cousin along. Everyone got drunk, as you do. At some point, the boyfriend went missing, and the search began. Eventually, the birthday girl found him in the bathroom, clapping his cousin. My favorite quote from the ensuing argument was, "Your breath smells like your cousin's kitty." But it didn't seem to matter much as they're married now with 2 kids. I guess drunken mishaps with cousins can't stand in the way of true love. Story 4. When I was a boot in the Marines, a few buddies and I got a hotel room in San Diego to party all weekend off base. 2 of us went out while the other 2 stayed in the room, saying they'd join us later. They never showed up, but we had a great time. When we finally got back to the room, we opened the door to find the other 2 Marines double-teaming a very large, toothless woman. She had a retainer with fake teeth sitting on the dresser next to the bed. It was pretty clear they had hired someone off Craigslist. One of them was clearly embarrassed and ran to the bathroom, while the other asked, "You fellas want in?" while still continuing. The toothless woman smiled at us and tried to wave us in to join. I just walked out, closed the door, and caught a cab back to base. Bonus. A few days later at work, I confronted them about what happened and asked if they at least used protection. They both said no, but added, "It's fine as long as you wash your dong off with Listerine afterward. It kills 99.9% of germs." What a pair of winners. Story 5. Same group of friends, 2 different parties. Party 1. It was a housewarming party thrown by an old high school friend, let's call him A. He invited both his high school and college friends, which created an interesting mix. His high school friends were mostly shucks redneck types, while his college friends were full-blown hipsters. Naturally, we didn't mix much. The high school crew stuck to the kitchen, drinking all the booze, and we barely saw the college crowd. Eventually, the high school group got tired, drunk, and ready to head out since most of us had work the next day. As we walked through the living room on our way out, we stumbled upon a scene. A crowd of people watching two girls in collars making out on the floor. One of them even went by the name Star. Without a word, we just awkwardly maneuvered around the spectacle and left. Which brings us to Party 2. A few months later, another gathering, this time mostly high school friends from Party 1. The friend A was there with his girlfriend, and at some point, the conversation turned to the first party. I casually blurted out, "Man, the only thing I really remember is the girls scissoring on the floor." A's girlfriend immediately went quiet before sheepishly admitting, "That was me." Oops. Later that night, another friend, sweet, funny, and very much in need of a job, was getting pretty drunk. She had just graduated college and was desperate for work. Coincidentally, someone at the party worked at a nonprofit that was right up her alley. Seeing her chance, our drunk friend grabbed a bottle of cheap wine, chugged straight from it, then cornered the poor nonprofit employee and started aggressively badgering her about getting hired. The grand finale? Mid-plea for a job, she lost her balance and crashed straight into the Christmas tree, taking the whole thing down with her. Safe to say, she did not get the job. Story 6. I was at a rock club when nature called badly. The bathrooms in this place were the stuff of legend, infamous for their sheer filth. So, for me to actually use one, you can imagine how desperate I was. I'm sitting there, doing my best to avoid catching some unholy disease from the toilet seat, when suddenly, a couple stumbles into the stall next to me. Within seconds, the unmistakable sounds of a drunken blowy fill the air. In that bathroom. In the filthiest bathroom in existence. Just when I think this situation can't get any worse, the guy rips the loudest, wettest, most ungodly fart I've ever heard. He immediately starts laughing while his unfortunate partner desperately tries not to puke all over him. Cue a symphony of male laughter and female voices screeching, "You disgusting jerk. Ah, young trashy, absolutely filthy love." Story 7. This happened in Manchester, in a busy precinct packed with bars, pubs, restaurants, and a cinema, the Printworks, if that wasn't obvious enough. There was a large club there, name escaping me now, but it always had a small crowd gathered outside, along with a few bouncers. It was around 8 p.m. on a weekend, meaning plenty of families, kids, and regular people just out for a casual evening, not looking to get completely wrecked. And then, right in the middle of it all, I saw her. A girl, absolutely wasted, clinging to a guy who was very visibly poking her pie. No attempt at subtlety, no shame, just straight-up full view, broad daylight debauchery. People walked past, shaking their heads in disbelief. The guy, meanwhile, was grinning like a caveman, basking in the approval of his equally trashy mates. As for her, she looked like she couldn't care less. Ah, Manchester. Story 8. When I was 16, my mother joined a group for single professional moms. She met with the organizers, and they invited her to an event they had scheduled for the next evening. The event was a screening of First Wives Club at a historic theater, and they had gotten a bunch of local firefighters to volunteer to be ushers. They were to greet each member with a rose and a glass of champagne, and then escorted her to her seat. But you asked for trashy, not classy, right? Stay with me here. My mother did not drive, so I dropped her off and promised to pick her up in 2 hours. 40 minutes later, I was back at the theater, my little brother in tow, looking at a large crowd of police and curious onlookers. My mom had called to tell me there had been an incident, and could I please come get her. This was before cell phones, so we marched up to an amused-looking officer, who escorted us into the theater. Inside we were greeted by the sight of a dozen or so well-dressed, scuffed-up, and very blotto middle-aged women in cuffs, and many very pissed-off, rumpled firefighters. Apparently, quite a few of the club members had overindulged in the free champagne, and asked the firefighters to demonstrate how quickly they could suit up. The firefighters obliged them by stripping off their gear. This was not enough for the women. They wanted it all off. While Diane Keaton shrieked at her cheating husband, these inebriated single moms decided to help the firefighters with the rest of their clothes. No was not an option, and they were quite forceful. That's about when the cops were called. According to my officer escort, when they arrived, the lobby was a scene of utter chaos. High heels had been kicked off, hair had been mussed, alarmed firemen scratched up, and clothing torn. These men had been trained to enter burning buildings. They had not been prepared for something like this. These were dumpster fires of a different sort. My officer friend pulled my mom out of a side office where she had been hiding with a couple of other women, and we were sent on our way. For years after, any time my mom got on me about something, I'd bring up the time I had to bring my 7-year-old brother to rescue her from a drunken attempted fireman groupie. Story 9. When I was a preteen, I ate some bad food at a restaurant. We went to Target afterward, and as soon as I walked in, my stomach instantly turned sour. I rushed to the bathroom, and after going, I felt the need to go again just 5 minutes later. So, I decided to stay in there until I was sure I was empty. This went on for a while, to the point where I told my parents to go to the other stores they wanted to visit and just call me when they were ready to leave. About 10 minutes into the ordeal, I heard people come in. I thought, great, there's no way they won't hear or smell this. I figured they'd probably turn around and leave. But then I noticed 3 pairs of feet in the stall next to mine, 1 female and 2 males. These trashy people had a full-on 3 score in the Target bathroom, while I'm shooting out sloppy wet turds that smell like death incarnate 3 feet away with just a stall wall in between us. I only ever saw their feet, but I'm counting it as something I experienced. Story 10. My ex-boyfriend, now deceased, once invited his friend over to my mother's house while I was at work. They broke in through a back window and helped themselves to my late grandfather's extremely expensive vintage bottle of scotch, which my mother had been saving for a special occasion. They drank straight from the bottle, shirtless, in the front yard. When I came home, I was contacted by the police, who told me neighbors had reported gunshots coming from our yard. It turned out my ex and his buddy were having a bit of target practice on our neighbor's orange tree. The cops found weed and different drugs on them. Even without the orange tree incident, it's not too hard to guess which state this happened in. Story 11. At a college party in an apartment, a seriously hot girl shows up in Daisy Dukes and a halter top, maybe 5 feet tall. She walks around drinking, then suddenly yells, "Somebody pound me." One guy approaches her, and after chatting for a couple of minutes, she drags him into the bedroom. About 20 minutes later, the guy emerges with a grin on his face. Nothing unusual so far. Then, from the bedroom we hear, "Send another dong in." Everyone looks around, but no one moves. There are maybe 15 guys and just as many girls at the party. She walks out of the bedroom, completely bare, scans the room, points at one guy, and says, "You, let's go." The guy follows her. She bangs 8 guys, coming to the doorway each time to pick a guy. After a couple of guys, she is not even closing the door. While calling the last 3 to 4 guys, she is standing there with smoothies running down her. It was early 80s, rubbers were not a thing in white bread college. I managed to avoid being picked by hanging in the kitchen, watching through the island/cabinet gap. She walks out after 8, wearing the shorts and halter, smoothie dripping down, then drinks a cup of party punch and leaves. Found out later she was a townie and had done it before. Story 12. I went to a wedding in a very rural part of PA. It was a great ceremony at a golf course, but the reception wrapped up at 10 p.m. So, we decided to head over to one of the local bars we had visited the night before. To set the scene, I'm in a car with 3 of my friends, all of us dressed in the typical post-wedding attire, dress pants and shirts, but with the sleeves rolled up, no ties, and our shirts untucked. You know, the kind of look you have when a wedding reception is winding down. The bar itself was definitely a small, country town spot. We pulled up to a bar called the Bear Moose Inn on the side of a country road. As we arrived, my headlights shined directly on a young couple banging. They were going at it right on the crushed rock parking lot, showing no effort to find any privacy, or at least not position themselves in plain view of where cars were pulling in. We all walked inside, waiting for our other friends to show up. As soon as we got in, I realized we definitely didn't fit in with our attire. It was the first time in my life where the people who were openly hooking up in the bar parking lot seemed to fit in better than I did. Story 13. I was at a fancy restaurant on the west side of LA, where there were plenty of rich people. As the waiter was seating us, 2 well-dressed guys, kind of douchey but obviously wealthy, were getting up from their table. As they walked through the dining room, one of them casually lifted his leg and let out a fart loud enough that it turned everyone's heads. Then, they jumped into a Ferrari out front and sped off, severely lacking in class. Edit. Why is Reddit acting like they want to hoist this guy up on their shoulders and sniff his farts in celebration? He and his buddy were clearly the wealthiest people in the place and definitely weren't trying to stick it to the rich. The guy just needed to fart and didn't think the rest of us were worth waiting until he got outside. What a guy. Story 14. In Afghanistan, we made a supply run to Kandahar airfield. We had some spare time before we left to go back to our COP, so we went to the Burger King there. Yes, the Air Force had a Burger King in Afghanistan. On the way there, we walked past a row of porta potties, and a strong gust of wind blew open the doors, and inside one of the porta potties was an Air Force chick on a ride with some guy like it was the last plane home. In a porta potty, in the 120 degrees Afghan summer. How they could bang in that stench is beyond me, but bravo. Story 15. I'm a paramedic, and we were called out for an active maternity case. When we arrived, there were 4 officers outside visibly upset, which usually means something unusual is going on inside, because typically, cops are calm at maternity calls. We went inside to find a 5th officer, a woman, staring in mute shock. The mother was standing there with the baby on the floor, not breathing, and the umbilical cord still attached, while holding a pipe that was still smoking. As we approached, the placenta fell out, which, for anyone who knows, signals this isn't her first time. We later learned this was her 7th child, with her 5th partner. My team focused on the baby, while the other crew worked on the mother. It turned out that the mother had been using substances all night, and when the baby fell out, she didn't seem concerned about its color. Then, this conversation happened. Isn't my baby beautiful? He's that color because his father is black. My partner, known for his quick wit, responded, Honey, unless his father is a smurf, he's not supposed to be that color. We managed to stabilize the baby, get him breathing, and start 4 access. The baby rapidly improved, and we got him into the ambulance. My partner went back inside to retrieve the placenta, but ended up battling the family's large pet rabbit for it. The baby did well, and was later placed into foster care. Story 16. Literally just last night, I was scrolling through Facebook and stumbled upon a relationship status update. Apparently, my 27-year-old brother and his 18-year-old girlfriend were engaged. Great. They've been together maybe 6 months? There were a lot of comments, so I kept scrolling. It started with the usual, is this serious? Yes, congrats, and so on, but quickly turned into a dumpster fire. Some random guy commented, you better look after her or I'm coming for you. And my brother, of course, responded with, I'm not giving my all to someone who doesn't care about me. I'm not going to sit here being asked for money and told I'm loved, then dumped 5 minutes later. What? Isn't this an engagement post? The drama deepens. The fiancé chimes in with, what the F jerk, you forgave me for that crap. You want to dump me, 'cause I was with my dad? What the hell? Then, it just spirals into accusations. My brother calls her an alcoholic, she accuses him of cheating, and they start posting screenshots of their arguments. At one point, there's a photo of my brother saying, what the F, I want to have babies with you, bubs, sandwiched between pictures of dogs she sent him. And the cherry on top? He proposed to her via text with, will you marry me, babe? Followed by diamond ring emojis, because, that's what makes it official. I know all this because, in between their petty bickering, they were posting these screenshots and messages directly on their engagement post for everyone to see. That's probably the trashiest thing I've seen in a while. Edit. I just checked their Facebook, and it looks like the girlfriend has deleted me as a friend and is now listing herself as single. Is this the shortest engagement in history? Story 17. My wife worked at a bar/restaurant, and the Christmas party was wild. There was a ton of alcohol flowing, and the giveaway gifts were top-notch. I saw 2 waitresses making out on the dance floor. Then, in the bathroom, I caught a cook and a bartender double-teaming a hostess. As we were leaving, one of the waiters, who was gay and cross-dressed, he was in costume, was having a moment with another straight guy and a girl who had the hots for the straight guy. The situation was hard to explain. Apparently, they all went home together and sealed 3 separate deals by the end of the night. The girl lost her V-card to the gay guy. The straight guy lost his gay V-card to the gay guy, and the gay guy had his first experience with a woman. It was a whirlwind of trashy, Christmas chaos. Story 18. I used to be on good terms with an old flame, Mary. We had stayed in touch over the years, visiting each other every so often, just as friends. Even though I still had some lingering feelings, I had moved on and was focused on my own life. During our visits, If I ever mentioned my current relationships, she would immediately cut me off, insisting that, as my ex, I should be more considerate of her feelings and not talk about other women. Out of respect, I always obliged. Fast forward to our last visit. We had a few drinks at a live music bar, and at the end of the night, Mary invited 2 local guys back to her place. Since I was staying there, I naturally tagged along. One of the guys was great, good conversation, easy to get along with. The other, not so much. He was crude, barely social, and at one point even joked about taking a framed photo of Mary into the bathroom for, well, reasons. And yet, this was the guy Mary chose. After chatting for a bit, she casually lay down on the carpet in the middle of the room, beckoned him over, and started making out with him right there, less than a meter away from me. This was the same woman who insisted I be sensitive to her feelings as my ex. That night completely changed how I saw her. We don't talk anymore, and looking back, I can pinpoint exactly when I lost any motivation to keep making an effort. Story 19. Last night, I witnessed 2 very drunken girls aggressively making out, and let me tell you, it was not the hot scene you'd expect. But buckle up, because this story only gets wilder. After their sloppy session, the taller one, let's call her Sarah, stumbles over to our table, absolutely white girl wasted. She throws an arm around me and my friend Kara, groaning, "I'm so excited right now." Then she starts trying to smooth-talk Kara, who wisely gets up and heads to the bathroom to escape. But does that stop Sarah? Nope. She chases her into the bathroom and, get this, crawls under the stall to corner Kara. At this point, I'm thinking, this girl just crawled on a bar bathroom floor. That's frigging disgusting. A few minutes later, Kara comes out looking thoroughly traumatized, and Sarah is right behind her, all bare. At this point, I'm wheezing with laughter, so I try to talk some sense into her, telling her to pull herself together. That's when she looks me dead in the eye and slurs, "I'm from Middletown, don't mess with me." For context, Middletown is a very trashy city in southwest Ohio. So I reply, "Darling, nobody is trying to mess with you, we're trying to get you the hell out." Apparently, that was the wrong thing to say, because she grabs my neck and tries to kiss me. I push her off, and she immediately falls to the floor and starts crying. Did anyone feel bad for her? Nope. Everyone knew I was in the right. Sarah eventually gets up, storms off into the night, and, presumably, was never seen again. And that, my friends, is why I will never set foot in a Middletown bar. Story 20. A mate of mine once told our friend group that a guy we knew from school was back after 6 months in the Navy. This mate was much closer to him than the rest of us, and suggested we all go on a night out together. We were about 19 at the time, living in Newcastle, a city well known for its party scene. From what I recall, the night was pretty standard and forgettable, until around 2 a.m. That's when things took a turn. We were in some grimy bar/nightclub when my mate suddenly tapped me on the shoulder, looking completely horrified, and pointed behind me. I turned around and saw a Navy guy, in the middle of the dance floor, making out with a girl. But it gets worse. They were both so drunk and uncoordinated that they kept violently clashing heads, to the point where at least one of them had a busted lip. By this point, a good couple dozen people had stopped what they were doing, forming a circle around them, half in horrified disgust, half in morbid curiosity. Our group collectively decided it might be time to extract the Navy guy before things got even worse. But the night wasn't over yet. Turns out, the girl had gotten separated from her friends and decided to follow us outside. One of my mates was so drunk he hadn't been fully aware of the chaos. So when this girl walked up to him and tried to kiss him, he was too out of it to properly resist. This did not sit well with the Navy guy. He immediately started shouting, accusing my mate of getting with his girl. Meanwhile, my mate, too wasted to process what was happening, just stood there, blinking in absolute confusion, as if his brain had fully shut down. At this point, the girl burst into tears, and the rest of us, who were sober enough to comprehend this complete and utter train wreck, stood by, thoroughly entertained. We eventually calmed everyone down and tried to reunite the girl with her friends, but she was too far gone to be of any help. So we dropped her off at one of those drunk people rescue stations, shout out to the UK for that, and called it a night. Needless to say, I haven't been on a night out with the Navy guy since. Probably for the best. Story 21. Last summer, my boyfriend and I decided to take a last-minute trip to Indianapolis for a concert. When we got there, we realized there must have been some major event going on because nearly all the hotel rooms were booked. Since we'd only be in town for less than 24 hours and just needed a place to sleep, we settled for a room at a Motel 6. After we checked in, the woman behind the front desk surprised us by walking out from behind it. She was barefoot, heavily pregnant, wearing tight Dora the Explorer pajama pants that showed off her fupa, and a neon yellow crop top with #blessed written across it in diagonal letters. Without saying a word, she walked past us and out the front door. Then, for the next 20 minutes, we watched as she chain-smoked while shouting into a very beat-up flip phone. Story 22. I was at my friend's house, a newly married couple's place. They were letting this homeless kid, who was a relative of one of their friends, stay with them. He was dirty, greasy, and had this strange habit of drinking warm milk that had been sitting out for 2 days. So me, the wife, and this dirty guy were sitting in a room, just watching TV. I went to the bathroom, and when I came back, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The wife was sitting on his lap, and they were engaged in a very intimate moment. Aside from the obvious red flags, she was newly married, and he was a random homeless guy. The guy's hands were filthy. I'm pretty sure he hadn't showered in months. So yeah, the newlywed wife let this homeless guy bang her. Story 23. This happened during my senior year, January 2nd. I was 18, and a few of my friends were the same age, with one of them just turning 18. To celebrate my friend Turtle's 18th, my buddy Kevin suggested we hit up a club. It wasn't exactly a high-class establishment, more of a rundown shack than anything resembling a club. When we walked in on that Friday night, there were only 2 girls dancing. The first one had a C-section scar that was still stitched up, and you could tell she wasn't really dancing, probably in pain. After a few minutes of barely moving, her milk started leaking down her front, and she quickly left. Then came girl number 2, who looked really strung out, with track marks all over her arms. She kept messing with her dress and readjusting it. We finally realized she was dealing with a menstrual aid that was irritating her. Eventually, she gave up, yanked it out, and tossed it over our heads into a trash can behind us. My friend Kevin, who'd come up with the idea to go in the first place, was loving it. Meanwhile, me, the birthday boy Turtle, and one other friend were just disgusted and speechless. We left immediately, and Kevin didn't get why we were so grossed out. Monday at school, Turtle told us he was coming out of the closet. I'm pretty sure that night pushed him to do it, probably would have happened anyway, but that experience definitely sealed the deal. I haven't stepped foot in a club since, and I refused to go to one for my bachelor party. Never again. Story 24. I used to work at a Bookie's on the north side, near the city center and close to the Liffey. One day, I noticed a woman walking around to all the customers, chatting with them for a few seconds before moving on. Curious, I asked one of the punters what she was saying to them. Turned out that she was offering BJ's for €20 and the full package for €50. Told her she was banned from the shop. A few minutes later, I stepped out to head to the bank. As I walked by a covered alleyway on the way, I spotted her leaning against the wall with some guy clapping her. This was only about 5 meters from a busy city center street on a Saturday afternoon, with a large family-oriented event happening nearby. Edit: a Bookie's is a bookmaker's. Somewhere people go to gamble on sports, etc. Story 25. I watched the following situation unfold. A woman was about to be arrested for public drunkenness. The cops were evidently feeling merciful and decided to put her into a cab instead. I guess this offended the woman. In response to being directed toward a cab, she lifted her dress and started to gush pee directly onto the cop's shoes. Story 26. Music festivals, man. I once saw an older lady in neon pink leopard print spandex sitting on a younger guy's shoulders, doing lines of powder off his bald head. I witnessed 2 girls, completely apocalyptically drunk, lying bare in the collapsed ruin of their tent, alternately throwing up and making out in the mess. On multiple occasions, I watched people buy a 6-foot bong, use it, bring it into the crowd, and then weep over the shards of the shattered bong. There was also a streaker riding a disturbingly fast, motorized, and taxidermied deer, screaming while tossing spent nitrous canisters at security. And after a guy's huge bag of shrooms exploded all over the ground, a frenzied mob of about 25 people truffle hunted and devoured the fallen fungi in under a minute. I may or may not have been one of them. Story 27. There was a group of friends, and one of them, Jake, was a funny, nice kid. His parents were going through a bitter divorce, and rumors started spreading that one of Jake's best friends, Chris, was actually hooking up with Jake's mom. No one could confirm it, though, until Chris pulled the ultimate power move by bringing Jake's mom as his date to prom. She showed up completely blackout drunk, getting even more wasted, and eventually got them both thrown out. Names have been changed for anonymity, but I felt really bad for Jake. He was a junior and had to live with that for a whole year. The weird thing is that Jake and his mom's relationship eventually healed. I saw them together on Facebook. I honestly don't know if I could ever forgive my mom for something like that, and definitely not Chris. Story 28. I knew someone who decided to have a home birth after learning she wouldn't be allowed to smoke in the maternity ward. She literally drove to the hospital while in labor, only to be stopped outside and told to put out her cigarette. Instead of complying, she just drove back home, still in labor, by the way. She ended up giving birth to an 8-pound baby on her back porch. Story 29. A girl banging an entire party of dudes. 2+ at a time. Like 11 total from what I can remember. I'm not opposed to a girl having numbers, but the way she went about it was about as trashy as it gets. The worst part was the next day when a friend called, inviting me to a bonfire at her house. I could hear her in the background asking who he was talking to, and when he told her it was me, her response was, "EW, I'm not shagging him." He called her a whore and told her she doesn't need to bang every guy that shows up, and she just kind of laughed and said, "Oh yeah, well then he can come." I decided to skip that one. She did it for a second night in a row, and then all the guys came to their senses and stopped inviting her because it was making the nights really weird and the mornings after extremely awkward. Story 30. Reminds me of a situation with my ex. We were at a party. After we broke up, we just happened to be at the same party, and she was intent that she was going to hook up with a guy named Joe. Joe shows up with his new girlfriend, so that killed my ex's plans. Plan B is a guy named Vinny. The best way to describe Vinny, at the risk of showing off my age, is that he was a mix of the Fonz from Happy Days and Biff Tannen from Back to the Future. He was the type of person who's an arrogant prick, but always managed to find some way to walk out of a party with a girl on his arm. So Vinny shows up. He's not even through the door before she all but shoves her melons in his face. And to be fair, she had an amazing jug. Most guys would have been all over my ex if not because of her jugs, but because it would have been an easy score. But not Vinny. His response, "Oh hell no. I know where you've been. I wouldn't clap you," points to random guy at the party, with his dong. He said it right in front of everybody. Favorite moment of the party. Story 31. Being a small-town Midwesterner, I've got plenty of trashy memories, and here are a few that stand out. 1. My hometown hosts a post-July 4th festival with concerts at the campground on the Friday and Saturday nights. Naturally, the stage is surrounded by the beer palace, making it a perfect setting for bad decisions. A few years ago, a local band was rocking the house near the end of their set, around 1 a.m., and it was at that point when several young women decided it was the right time to hit the stage and flash the crowd. A few bailed immediately, but one stayed long enough for the cops to come in and escort her off. 2. My half-sister's first wedding reception was something else. Her mom was wearing a dress about 7 sizes too small, and the buttons were popping off every few minutes. Her husband and his groomsmen, including my half-brother, decided to try backflips while drunk, turning the whole thing into a white trash circus. And of course, it was the mid-90s, so I'm Too Sexy by Right Said Fred made an appearance at least once. 3. In high school, there was this one couple who took public displays of affection to a whole new level. Pretty sure her melons almost made an appearance in the hallway a few times during their incredibly aggressive makeout sessions. 4. A few years ago, I joined a Facebook group that thrived on acting as trashy as possible. When I went to one of their meetup parties, let's just say, no amount of bleach could have cleaned up the white trash I saw that night. One couple banged so hard in the bar's bathroom that they broke the sink. There were multiple flashings, makeout sessions galore. I definitely participated. I was pretty poor white trash at the time. Now I'm just merely poor white trash. It was like a live-action taping of Jerry Springer, and honestly, it was one of the most fascinating things I've ever witnessed. Story 32. I used to work as a door girl at a gay club, and one Halloween, a group of male corn stars came in dressed as cowboys. Their costumes were pretty much just cowboy hats and bandanas tied around their jewels, with the fabric wrapped around one leg. They were essentially bare. A photographer came over and started taking pictures of them while they stood about 20 feet away from me. To make things even more intense, they started making out with each other. If they leaned forward even slightly, I could see everything. This went on for a solid 10 minutes, and I'm pretty sure I'm in the background of every single photo, looking completely horrified. Story 33. Last week, I met a pregnant woman and her boyfriend. They invited my girlfriend and me to hang out, so we thought, sure. We brought 3 beers, a Gatorade, and some juice, assuming my girlfriend, her boyfriend, and I would have a beer while the pregnant woman would want a non-alcoholic drink. But nope. As soon as I set the beers on the table, she immediately says, "Oh, I love Heineken, do you mind?" and grabs one. My girlfriend and I were both shocked, trying to figure out how to politely handle the situation, while the woman and her boyfriend kept crushing beers. Oh, and the guy rolled some blunts, and they smoked both of them too. The pregnant woman even said something like, "I'm so buzzed right now," which left my girlfriend totally confused. I could go into more detail, but I'll keep it short. Meanwhile, the guy was talking about how he buys fake credit cards and gold bricks off the dark web to make money. It was wild. Story 34. Back when I worked as a furniture mover in DC, I got delayed while trying to deliver my cargo because a morbidly obese woman was completely bare, doing push-ups in the middle of the road. She was clearly high on something, and it took about 6 police officers to catch her, cuff her, and get her into a squad car. It took roughly 45 minutes because she kept darting around parked cars and weaving through the traffic that had stalled. When they finally got her cuffed, she somehow managed to position her feet in a way that made it almost impossible to get her into the back of the squad car. Oh, and I should mention, PCP makes people insanely strong. Based on how the officers were reacting, it seemed like they had dealt with her many, many times before. Also, while living in DC, I was outside the Rock and Roll Hotel when I saw this lady walking down the street in filthy white stirrup pants that were ripped from the front waist to the back. My buddy nudged me and said, "You think that's for fashion or function?" We watched her drunkenly waddle by, then bend over at the waist between 2 parked cars and drop a deuce. She didn't squat, she bent 90 degrees at the waist and pushed it out, sending it flying about a yard before it splat on the road. My buddy just looked at me and said, "I guess function. Stay classy, H Street." Story 35. A guy was peeing on the door to my university center in broad daylight. We turned the corner, and there he was, casually making a lemonade deposit, right at the doorknob level of the door. He didn't even stop when he saw us. He just shrugged and kept going, while a group of half a dozen young women stood there waiting for him to finish. When he was done, he shook off, tucked everything away, and then offered to shake my hand and introduce himself. I just lost it and yelled, "What the hell is wrong with you?" before shooing him away. After that, we knocked on the window of the student center until someone let us in, since we weren't about to touch the now urine-covered door. Story 36. About 15 years ago, on New Year's Eve in downtown Tempe, my friends and I were walking back to our cars after midnight when we noticed a group of police surrounding a large green electric junction box. As we got closer, we saw that it was 2 completely bare homeless people, a guy and a girl, doing it behind the box. They were determined to finish, despite the officer's presence. When they realized the cops weren't going to intervene right away, they started waddling around, waving at the crowd like it was some kind of parade, the guy still going at it like a rabbit. Mace was sprayed, batons were used to pry them apart, but they didn't stop. At one point, the guy was so focused that it seemed like he might actually finish. It wasn't until a taser was deployed that they both collapsed onto Mill Street like sacks of concrete. From what I could tell, the woman got tossed through their connection. The whole bizarre scene lasted about 15 minutes. To this day, I'm both scarred and oddly entertained thinking back on it. Story 37. I was at Marshall's shopping for clothes when I saw a younger mom, probably no older than 25, with her 2 or 3-year-old daughter nearby. The little girl sneezed, and the mom grabbed a t-shirt off the rack, wiped her daughter's nose with it, and then just put it back. I couldn't help but gasp aloud, because that was just disgusting. She pretended I wasn't there and walked off with her now snot-free daughter. I walked over to the shirt they'd used, and sure enough, there was snot all over the front. From that day on, I've always washed any new clothes I buy. Story 38. I was walking down the street when I noticed a woman kneeling further ahead on the sidewalk. As soon as she saw me, she stood up and started walking toward me. As she passed, she shot me a dirty look and yelled, "I don't give a crap." I was a bit confused until I walked past where she'd been kneeling and saw a small pile of poop on the ground. Story 39. I saw a morbidly obese woman wearing a wife beater, no inners and booty shorts, open a packet of wet bathroom wipes in the middle of the aisle at Walmart. Without hesitation, she pulled one out, dug it down into her shorts to wipe her backside, then casually put the container and used wipe back on the shelf. She just stood there, wiping her behind like it was no big deal. On a less disgusting note, I was getting my car serviced last year when I saw a young mom, probably around my age, with her infant. I couldn't believe my eyes when she filled a baby bottle with Diet Mountain Dew, propped it up in the baby's mouth, and then walked away to smoke a cigarette. The baby couldn't have been more than 3 months old. It's shocking how clueless some parents can be. Story 40. I was at a supper club in rural Wisconsin when I noticed the teenage girl working, as the bartender, was also drinking while on the job, and babysitting her son. It was around 9 p.m., and a bunch of locals were hanging out. The mom was smoking cigarettes, chatting, and dancing with her baby on the bar. At one point, she leaned over and asked my friend if she could hold the baby for a hot minute while I go to the bathroom with Jimmy. Story 41. This was really heartbreaking. I was on the bus, and there were 2 adults who were clearly extremely intoxicated, loudly talking about being high and being touchy with each other. Everyone around was trying to ignore them. Then, from the back of the bus, I heard a voice. It was their young son. He didn't realize his parents were on the bus, and now he had to witness their behavior. I could see by the look on his face that he'd probably seen this kind of thing before. He begged them to stop, but they just kept going. He looked like he was about to break down in tears. He ended up getting off the bus and walking away. I wanted to go after him and offer help, but I didn't know how. I really hoped that kid found a way to be okay. Story 42. On the 4th of July, which also happened to be my last day working at the liquor store, a woman in her late 40s or early 50s came in. She was beet red, wearing a see-through shirt, definitely not the most flattering look. She grabbed a bottle of Jägermeister from the fridge and said, "Sorry, I've been drinking all day." Then, a guy came up behind her with another bottle of Jaeger. And from there, she just kept yelling at him the whole time, saying, "Put it back or I'll mess with your girlfriend." And it was at that moment that I realized I don't want to be back there as an employee ever again. Story 43. I was at a fireworks show on the beach this past 4th of July. There was this couple where the woman was clearly much younger than the guy. Like, it could have been his daughter. They were all over each other, to the point where it was hard not to notice. My friends and I were laughing about it, but then the fireworks started, so we all turned our attention to that. When I looked back, the girl was giving the guy a handy under their blanket. The blanket was visibly moving, and all around us, there were families and kids running around. They had no shame whatsoever. Story 44. The first and only time I attended a NASCAR race was definitely one for the books. A brand new track had just opened near us, and my boyfriend scored free tickets. The race itself was fine, but the chaos began when it was time to leave. Since the track was still new, the parking and exits weren't fully finished, meaning all 180,000 people were trying to leave at the same time. Instant traffic jam. What happened next was straight out of a sitcom. The couple in front of us started losing it, honking, yelling, causing enough of a scene that the cops came over to check it out. Instead of calming down, the driver escalated things by cursing at the officers and refusing to cooperate. Then, for his grand finale, he refused to exit his car. One cop stood directly in front of the car, hands up, telling the guy to stay put. So naturally, instead of listening, the guy inched forward and tapped the cop with his car. I have never seen law enforcement move so fast in my life. Within seconds, the cops yanked the driver out of his car, and just when we thought things couldn't get any wilder, his wife/common-law wife/soulmate in bad decisions launched herself out of the passenger seat and jumped onto the cop's back, screaming, "Get off my man!" Meanwhile, my boyfriend and I were just sitting there in his tiny Geo Metro, watching the madness unfold with our jaws on the floor. In the end, they both got arrested, we had to give statements, and the whole thing ended up in court months later. For the record, I have nothing against NASCAR or its fans. Everyone else at the event was perfectly fine, even during the parking disaster. But that couple? Pure entertainment. Story 45. I work at a pawn shop, and I think it was my 2nd or 3rd week on the job when this one guy started showing up every single day with some busted tool, desperately trying to pawn it for drug money. And every day we'd tell him the same thing. His junk wasn't worth anything. He'd leave, only to show up again the next day like clockwork. Then one day, he came in pissed drunk with fresh track marks on his arms, but this time, he actually had some gold. We tested it. Fake, of course, but he had to wait around for his ride, so he stuck around. We had some saddles for sale on benches, and he leaned against one, clearly struggling to stay upright. He was wearing an unbuttoned shirt with nothing underneath, and a pair of plaid shorts that looked like they had been through wars. And that's when it happened. His shorts started to slip. I tried to look away, but it was like watching a car crash. You have to look. And in a matter of seconds, his shorts hit the floor, revealing a monumental crap stain smeared all over his behind. Now, if he had reacted, even just a little embarrassment, I might not be telling this story. But nope, this man had no shame. He just casually looked at me and said, "Damn, why you yelling at me? A man's gotta do what a man's gotta do." Then he pulled his pants back up like nothing happened and strolled right out into the parking lot, still fully visible to a packed restaurant next door. I've seen a lot of trashy stuff working at a pawn shop, but that one takes the cake. Story 46. Working at a bar, I've seen some messed up things. But this one night was special, real nasty. This nasty obese girl came in wearing a tight shirt skirt, fake leather boots, and a tight top, about 3 sizes too small. We used stamps that only showed under the UV light at the entrance. Few hours into the night, I was in the coat room this night. The bouncers were having fun with me, asking colleagues for my number, etc. to give this nasty girl, when she out of nowhere starts making out with this one guy. Few minutes later, they're walking out of there, onto this little grass hill we have across the street. 5 minutes later, guy comes walking in alone, looking very giddy and happy. A few minutes later, girl walked back in, when one of the bouncers grabbed the other bouncer and pulled my arm and pointed at the girl's legs as she was standing underneath the UV light. Yes, you guessed it, she it running down her legs, into her boots, hilarious and nastier than a MF at the same time. Story 47. We were having a blast at a pub in Brisbane called the Story Bridge Hotel, drinking, dancing, and just living it up, when a dance circle started forming in the middle of the floor. You know the type, where everyone takes turns showing off, trying to outdo the last person's embarrassment. Then, the drunkest girl in the place got her shot. She staggered into the middle, threw some random insults at people, and without a second thought, squatted down and proceeded to piss all over the dance floor. She soaked the floor and ended up splashing her own ankles in the process. The whole room went silent in shock. Finally, one guy muttered something like, "Go to the bathroom, you twat," to which she casually responded, "Drink my piss, d-head," before wiping herself with her hand, flipping him off, and stumbling off. Then, like nothing happened, everyone just kept on dancing in her puddle. Good times. Story 48. One time in college, I was on a date with a guy, sitting on a bench at a public park. We were chatting as the sun set, and the area we were in wasn't very visible since there were no streetlights nearby, and the fading light kept us hidden from passers-by. Being in a college town, once night hit, the park was full of drunk students stumbling around. My date and I quietly people-watched, laughing at the drunk girls tripping in their high heels and barely dressed, heading out to the clubs. Then we saw a group of women pass by, and one of them stopped and walked around a tree, giving us a perfect view of her without her knowing. She was wearing a tiny dress, and we watched as she started peeing right there in front of us, standing up like a guy. She finished and just casually walked off. My date was completely horrified by what he had just witnessed. It was like he suddenly realized women could be just as gross as men, and he wore this confused, horrified expression for the rest of the night. Story 49. I was riding Greyhound, so I should have known something would go down. During the trip, 2 passengers, one male, the other female, started chatting, and it turned out they'd both recently been released from prison. The guy had a bottle of liquor, which they began sharing, and almost immediately they started banging right there. Somehow, they weren't asked to get off the bus. Classic Greyhound. Edit. For the folks asking about location, this was in Northern California. Exact route was Eureka to Oakland. Edit 2. Greyhound is a long-distance bus line. Story 50. I was driving one day in slow-moving city traffic, with the summer sun warming everything up and the windows down. The radio was blasting, but while stopped at a light, I noticed an argument starting between a man and a woman at a bus stop 2 lanes over. I turned the volume down, and though I hated that I was drawn into it, I couldn't help but listen. There were no other cars at the light with me. The woman had a little girl, maybe 5 years old, sitting at the opposite end of the bench, while the mom sat at the closer end, near the man who was pacing and standing. From the muffled sounds through the city noise, it was clear they were a couple. She was pregnant, maybe with his child. The man looked like a street version of Vanilla Ice. Straight-brimmed Lakers cap cocked to the 2 o'clock side of his forehead, an oversized Clippers jersey, full-sleeve tattoos. She was dressed in what looked like sad, casual poverty, worn shorts and a white frilly top that had lost its frill over time, but it was all she had. She looked defeated, like she'd been in this exact argument with this exact man countless times before, knowing her participation was pointless. As the light turned green, I couldn't help but wonder how they ended up here. Why he chose her, why she chose him. But as the woman stood to address her daughter at the other end of the bench, she vented some frustration toward the little girl. The cars started moving, but I kept watching, still listening to the man scream at her, verbally tearing her apart. Just as I began to accelerate, hoping the situation would resolve before they got on the bus, I saw a blur of motion from him to her. Then came a vicious, meaty thud, the sound of a punch landing squarely on her face, and a horrible, gasping moan. I watched her stumble and fall as he kept yelling at her. By then, I was moving through the intersection, still processing what I had just witnessed. I felt her pain, her trauma, and the innocence that had just fallen to the sidewalk in blood. After that, all I could do was imagine the rest of it. And I did nothing. I didn't call anyone. I didn't intervene. It's been about 7 years now, and the memory still haunts me. I drive by that same bus stop every month or so, and I can still see the shadows of that day on the faded advertisements. The worst part, my inaction. The fact that I did nothing to help someone who desperately needed it is the trashiest thing I've ever witnessed. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.